is the Banner Baseball Show coming to you live on a Friday afternoon, a beautiful day in Baltimore. But we got to talk about some bad news when it comes to the Baltimore Orioles. Paul Mancano and Andy Kostka here with you. Andy at the ballpark, Paul back at the Banner offices about a mile up the road. Andy, devastating news for the Orioles pitching staff. We saw the Michael Elias press conference on the schedule. We said, this is probably not good news, and we got a double whammy. Both John Means and Tyler Wells are out for the season, and both will require elbow surgery. Just devastating blow for the Orioles pitching staff.
Yeah, both have UCL injuries that require surgery to fix. That could be not necessarily Tommy John surgery. It's kind of discovered when a surgeon opens up one of their elbows and decides how is best to fix this ligament. It could end up being Tommy John. Could be a different sort of elbow surgery. We don't know that side of things exact, but we do know it's a UCL injury. They will miss the end of this season, and most likely they will miss the beginning of next season. I mean, these are, even if it's not exactly Tommy John surgery, these things take 11 months to 12 months. If it's a pretty everyone's is pretty difficult. It's an elbow surgery, but if it's Tommy John, can take a little longer than that. But there are some options, Michael Elias said, that might be more like the 11 to 12 month stage. Even that, obviously, you'd be looking at May, as the earliest they'd come back, which is May 2025. That is the earliest they'd come back, which is not great news for the pitching staff, especially difficult news for John Means, who is an impending free agent. So that's will be a difficult rehab process for him, and the path forward is unclear on what that might look like. One bit of news that was not as difficult to swallow from an Orioles fan perspective was Dean Kramer has an inflamed tricep, which is why he's on the injured list right now. But Michael Elias described it as not really a worry long term. Dean Kramer might require a rehab start or two, just because he's been out for a little bit. But long term, they expect Dean Kramer back, which gives them not as much pitching depth, but you still have, including guys in AAA, you still have, probably 7 candidates, maybe 8 candidates for starting innings, even with Tyler Wells and John Means out for the year. So that's why, the O's have so many starting pitchers. It's why every team needs to have starting pitchers. Injuries will always happen. And unfortunately, it struck these two guys who have both been through a Tommy John surgery before. So it's difficult pill to swallow for them.
Yeah, we're going to map out what this rotation could look like. But anytime major injury news like this hits, you think of the player first and foremost. You think about how it affects them as a human being, because this is incredibly difficult news. John Means obviously has already undergone Tommy John surgery once. He worked his way all the way back. He wasn't able to pitch in the playoffs last year after going through some of the most brutal seasons in Orioles history. He was the veteran on this squad. He was great anytime he was available and healthy, and he just never could be available and healthy enough. And he is an impending free agent, like you said, Andy, which means he may have already pitched his last game in an Orioles uniform. He's 31 years old with a checkered injury past that is hitting free agency. Teams are wary of guys like those, and it's going to be difficult for somebody like John Means to be able to secure a long-term contract from a team that is going to set him up for the next 5 or 10 years. And you think of Tyler Wells, it's not quite as devastating when it comes to Wells because he hasn't had Tommy John.
He has had Tommy John. He was in the Minnesota Twins farm system when he had it. Right. So,
which is part of the reason they were able to get him in the Rule 5 draft.
Correct.
A few years ago.
So this is, for Tyler Wells too, it is a large blow. It's I think the recency of what John Means just went through. He's pitched 40 innings or thereabout since coming back from injury. At the end of last year, came back from a long rehab of Tommy John. Then he missed the postseason. Think about it now. This is a guy who had been on one side of the rebuild, saw the Orioles, become a contender. Um, was healthy at the end of last season, then had elbow soreness that kept him out, or forearm service, I suppose was maybe the injured list designation at that point, kept him out of pitching in the postseason. He probably would have started one of those 3 games for Baltimore, and now it's unclear if he will, admittedly, ever pitch for Baltimore again. Very real possibility.
Absolutely. And this rotation, look, they have 5 guys, and when Dean Kramer comes back, they have 6 who can start games. But still, we never got to see this pitching staff fully healthy and together. The season began with the news that John Means was a month behind his schedule, that he was not going to be ready to start the season, that Kyle Bradish had a UCL sprain. He was able to work his way back from that after about a month, but we never saw what could have been one of the better rotations in all of baseball, fully healthy and together. We have seen Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez shove. We've seen great performances from guys surprisingly like Cole Irvin, and Dean Kramer has shown that he can be more of a dog and an innings eater than maybe he showed in previous years. But it's just brutal. You never saw this group fully healthy and together, and I tend to think that this group that they have right now will probably have to take some additions, whether it be prospects or whether it be trade pieces over the next few months.
Yeah, definitely could require some additions just to bolster this, because as Michael Elias said, there could still be injuries ahead. This
Yeah.
is a baseball wide issue right now, and on paper this rotation looked incredibly formidable. Right now, it's still a good rotation because the top, you're still doing pretty well, but it's just this idea that it didn't live up to the potential of what it could have been. And a lot of teams around baseball, look at Spencer Strider, and the Atlanta Braves pitcher. There's a lot of pitching injuries that have cropped up lately. One of the potential additions that could be, and Mike Elias actually said, it's been kind of on the tip of the tongue of many conversations, is Cade Povich. He's right now in AAA. He's pitching tonight for Norfolk. He has a 2.35 ERA this year, which is great, obviously. Strikeouts, 71 strikeouts so far in 53 innings. His strikeout to walk ratio is 3.74, which is pretty good. He's cut down some on his walks, which was the kind of major concern last year. Was does he have too many walks? Chase McDermott is another prospect in AAA. Who could be an option. But I wouldn't be shocked if this is a busier trade deadline, because you probably have to bolster the bullpen some, and you probably have to maybe add a starter. I would be less concerned about adding a starting pitcher because on paper, if Cade Povich and Chase McDermott come up, they will take time to settle. Every single pitcher does. Every single batter does when you make that jump. But if you call them up early enough, they could be at a pretty good level come September, October. So you feel pretty good still about the overall depth of the organization. The bullpen still probably requires a trade of some sort to bolster. Or you kind of backfill and you say, okay, let's add a starter, and we bump Albert Suarez to the bullpen. He's been a stable guy in the bullpen. Cole Irvin has been bumped to the bullpen before, which is a tough thing to do because he's pitching so well and really deserves a place in the rotation. So it'll be interesting to see how the coming weeks at this point. I mean, we're not terribly far away. We're a month or two from the trade deadline. I guess 2 months. But yeah, about 2 months from the trade deadline. Yeah. So yeah, thanks. Sorry, I have no concept of time.
Yeah, no, it's hard to tell where you are in the midst of this.
One interesting, factor here was I kind of wondered why, if it was possible. Kyle Bradish obviously also had a UCL injury this offseason, and he's pitching. How did that compare to this? And Mike Elias, of course, said everything's case-by-case basis. He did say Wells and Means did not receive PRP injections, which is something that Bradish received, and it had great, value, and now he's pitching again without going under the knife. That probably is a case where um, these players have already had Tommy John surgery once before. The injury could be a little more severe than Bradish's case. Multiple factors pop in. Maybe they felt like, based on previous examples, they could have done, similar kind of rehab things, the previous times they had ligament issues, and it didn't work then. Maybe they decided straight to surgery. But we do know they did not have PRP injections, which is just an interesting that, it worked for Bradish, it did, but does not always, it's not an option for everybody and doesn't work for everybody. In this case, they did not attempt it.
Yeah, there are different levels of strains when it comes to that ligament. The case I think you could make for calling up one of Cade Povich or Chase McDermott and bumping Albert Suarez and or Cole Irvin to the bullpen is maybe you use these next 2 months as a trial period for either one of those guys, Povich or McDermott. I think Povich is more ready right now, given his stats at AAA Norfolk. He's also a lefty, so that would be a nice fit if you bump Cole Irvin to the bullpen. You give them a trial period to see if they can be regular starters for you down the stretch before you get to the trade deadline so that you can reassess your needs in 2 months and say, all right, this didn't work out, or look, Povich looks like a dude. We don't need to go out and trade for another starter. Let's use all our resources and go get a back end of the bullpen reliever. That would be my case for calling up one of these two guys, even though you have 5 or 6 guys right now. The Orioles were looking at a 6-man rotation a week ago before all of this blew up, because the month of June is going to be a gauntlet, one off day for the entire month. So they are going to need as many arms as possible, throwing as many innings as possible just to be able to get through this. And you'd like to have a fresh arm in somebody like Povich or McDermott.
Yeah, I would not be shocked to see that being the course of action at some point soon to call up, especially Cade Povich. Chase McDermott has also put up good numbers in AAA, but and they kind of, because they entered around the same time in the organization, they tend to be kind of a thought of as kind of a package deal.
Well, they're 9 and 10 on the Orioles prospect rankings according to MLB Pipeline too. So they've always been lumped together.
Yeah, they are two guys that have kind of been joined at the hip since they entered the organization, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Cade Povich at some point soon. I have no, I'm not hinting at any intel that I don't have, but just from the way that Mike Elias talked about Cade Povich today, he said he's put himself in a great position, to help this organization in the coming this season, most likely. Especially if you think about it, Cade is Rule 5 eligible this offseason if he's not on the 40-man roster. So there is a little bit of incentive as well to see what you have and put him on the 40-man and let him pitch some innings in June, because they're going to need a lot of help. There's 29 games in 30 days, and that's not going to be an easy stretch by any stretch of the imagination. And you figure you get Dean Kramer back at some point in there. Mike Elias said late in the month of June would be his guess, but it could spill over into July. So while Dean Kramer is still sidelined, Cade Povich or Chase McDermott or both, could really see some innings here, and it would be hard, to move Cole Irvin out of the rotation. I think people mostly mention Cole Irvin as a guy that can move out of the rotation because his track record as a starter is a little shorter than obviously you wouldn't move Corbin Burns out of the rotation to be a bullpen arm. Cole Irvin has not been an ace caliber pitcher for his entire career. At the same time, though, same token, he's pitching this year incredibly well, and it would be it'd be tough call, but we've seen out of the bullpen too. He can be a good pitcher out of the bullpen, get multiple innings. I know he had a tough one in St. Louis, but the home run that was off him in St. Louis was like 6 inches off the ground. The pitch. I mean, it was one of those where you tip your cap and say, nothing Cole Irvin can do in that situation. But yeah, basically, the nuts and bolts of this thing is that the prospects should probably get a chance pretty soon. Mike Elias likes the depth of starting pitching they still have. He really talked up Albert Suarez for good reason, because that was a pro scouting development find. I mean, a lot of props to Mike Snyder, who's one of the pro scouting guys, for helping to seal that deal and getting him in last year, doing some rehab, goes to winter ball, implements changes that Baltimore wanted, and now comes back and has been pitching really well in all sorts of environments, relieving or starting. So I don't think it's necessarily panic time. I would, always caution that, there's a reason why you stockpile arms.
Right.
It's this. This is the reason. And now we're going to see, how well does, can Albert Suarez keep this going?
Right.
Can Cole Irvin keep this going? How healthy can Dean Kramer be when he does come back? What do Cade Povich and Chase McDermott look like if and when they make their debuts? Those are the big questions that have to be answered before July 31st, I believe, is the trade deadline. So,
Yeah.
Before the trade deadline, you got to figure that out. Otherwise, it's going to be a big shopping trip.
Exactly. And we know, like you said, Andy, a lot of teams around baseball are missing starters right now, so they may have to pay a premium in order to get a quality starting pitcher from another team.
Plus, with the extra, postseason spot, that extra wild card spot, there are fewer sellers. More teams at 500 or just slightly below at this point in the season, especially, are thinking maybe we can see. And at the trade deadline, they might actually stand pat or even be buyers themselves. I mean, we saw, was it the Angels last year went out and retooled and got some guys, and then they DFA'd half of them 2 weeks later. Because it didn't work. So,
right.
Just interesting landscape baseball has itself, where there's more teams that feel like they are playoff positioned. So it's a tougher market to get guys. But Mike Elias said, they are actively talking to teams. And that's most of that is due diligence. He always says all the time that you talk to teams 24/7 because you need to know who's available, who's not. Tanner Scott would be an interesting guy in the Miami bullpen you could bring back to Baltimore.
Great reunion.
Yeah, that'd be a name I think would make a lot of sense here. But you might have to add in a starter, and you already have those. You already have the conversations going, so you kind of know what starters are on the market potentially.
Exactly. Well, Andy, you have to get to a radio hit, and then you've got a game to cover because the Orioles start a 3-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays tonight, and then they embark on a very, very difficult month of June. They head up to Toronto to start that month. Andy, at AF Kostka on Twitter. I am at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Please subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, $1 for 6 months. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share the Banner Show, the Banner Baseball Show with your friends. For Andy Kostka, I'm Paul Mancano. Catch you next time.